No matter who you are or where you go, heading outside even for a few minutes is always worth it. I'm your host, Amy Bouchatz, and here at Humans Outside, we're using the Humans Outside 365 Challenge to build a life around spending time in nature while hearing from fascinating outdoor-minded guests. As a journalist for 19 years, I've let curiosity be my guide. After my husband's injuries from military service, we started looking for a better way to live. That's why we moved sight unseen to Alaska to see if an outdoor-focused life was the answer. Since September 2017, I've personally spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter what, to explore how nature can change my life. Ready to hear from experts and outdoor lovers who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same? Let's go! What is happening to your brain, emotions, and being when you experience something amazing outside? And why should we find ways to seek or make room for more of these experiences? The feeling I'm talking about can best be described as awe. You might think about finding it when you see something big that puts you in a context with the outdoor world. Think gazing on the Grand Canyon, standing on top of a mountain peak, or taking in a huge waterfall. But the feeling can be found in other moments too, even in simple things like experiencing your child in an incredible moment of their own or watching a bird soar through the sky. Making room for these experiences, chasing them, creating them, or simply allowing them by going outside can have a profound impact on your inside life. That's something you've probably gotten a taste of as you've built your own daily nature habit. It's something I've experienced myself over my 2,000 days outside. And it's something today's guest wrote about in his new book, Awe, The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. Professor Dr. Dacher Keltner is one of the world's foremost emotion scientists. He's a professor of psychology at UC Berkeley and the director of the Greater Good Science Center. And he was the scientific advisor behind Pixar's Inside Out, which is one of my absolute favorite movies because of the accessible way it has helped me, a full-grown adult, understand my own emotions. Actually, just hearing the theme song cues me up to cry like a baby, so maybe let's not talk about that very much. Today, Dacher is going to clue us into some of the science of awe with a view towards why and how we can take practical steps to chase more of it in our own lives. Dacher, welcome to Humans Outside.
It's good to be with you, Amy, but I wish we were outside. So
yeah. Well, let's scene set a little bit because we love to imagine ourselves with our guests in their favorite outdoor space. So if that was true and we were hanging outside with you somewhere that you really love and value, where would we be?
Oh, well, High Sierras, Evolution Valley in the Sierras, or on the Berkeley campus. We have a couple of streams running through it with redwoods, and there are a couple of spots there where you can just sit and watch the water and be near the redwood trees. So I'm pretty lucky.
I grew up near there. It is verifiably beautiful. I've seen it. I grew up near UCSC. Same idea, right? Just this sort of coastal mountain range or coastal forest that is just to die for. So I can easily imagine ourselves with you there. What a lovely spot to hang out. So can you kick us off by telling us about just a little bit about your background and how you became someone who likes to go outside and spend time with streams and redwoods?
Yeah, I grew up in California. Well, I was actually born in Mexico, grew up in California, and first in Los Angeles, and then in the hills, in a place called Laurel Canyon, and then later in the foothills of the Sierras. And it was interesting because the first reason why I love the outdoors, and it figures prominently in the book, rightfully so, is my family. My mom was a college teacher, had the summers off, and we did these wild camping trips in the late 60s. One of them, we drove straight into the Colorado Rockies, and my dad loves camping. And, for a month, we camped. And I think about that today, like, God, I never did that with my daughters. So that's one. And then when we moved to the foothills of the Sierras, we had 5 acres. It was a pretty rural town at 600 elevation. Kind of these rolling California hills. And I just wandered outside all the time, just outside, dirt roads, looking at dark skies. And I just came to love the outdoors. And then with my own children, we camp ritualistically at a place in the Sierras that my wife, her family is part of. And then I just started backpacking, and probably really passionately 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. And, when people ask me, like, just give me one phrase to make me happy, and I teach so many people happiness these days, or I have a really, really depressed son, and what do I do? And the phrase that always comes to mind is like, get outdoors, just get outdoors. So I've been lucky just to have a pretty long-standing relationship to being outdoors.
Yeah. I grew up visiting a little tiny lake in the Sierras called Sardine Lake. It
Oh,
is
where is that?
So it is not terribly far from Gold and Silver Lakes.
Right.
You go
Yep.
up past Truckee, up north of Truckee, and you head up past this little turnoff. It's a little store. Gosh, I don't even know if it's still there. Bassett's. And you head up there, and it is tucked back beneath a mountain called the Sierra Butte. And
Uh-huh.
of course, as a kid, always joking that it was the Sierra Butte. That's what kids
Yeah.
do. Yeah. And
Got it.
there's a fire tower, watchtower up there, and we hike up there. But we went up there every summer, and my father went up there every summer when he was growing up. And it
Yeah.
was
Oh,
just
man.
the place that you go and to get away for that week. But it becomes this thing that you go to, right? And what
Yeah.
I want to do and what I hope we do here at Humans Outside is to make going outside something that, as you're mentioning for the
Yeah.
people you talk to, go outside every day and be
Yeah.
a part, have that be a part of your personal ecosystem. It's not a
I
destination.
agree.
It's not a vacation 1 week a year. It's just part of who you are. That's the goal,
Yeah.
right?
I could not agree more.
So we're going to be talking about awe today. Well, by the way,
Yeah.
the Sierra Butte, full of awe. Okay, so maybe
Yeah.
you could just start by telling us what is awe? What is this emotion that you're describing? Can you color that
Yeah.
in for us a little bit?
Sure. It's a tough one because people just intuitively believe that awe can't be defined. You can't put words to it. You can't study it. It's only recently been studied scientifically. So let's start with a definition. And I really ground this definition in different philosophers, in particular Edmund Burke, which is awe is an emotion that you have, which is a fleeting subjective feeling in response to things that are vast and mysterious that you can't make sense of, right? So vast means it's large physically. It could be large semantically, like, wow, that was an amazing idea. And it can also be large or vast in terms of time. Often people, if you have a memory from your childhood suddenly surface, you'll feel awe, like, wow, that was so long ago, right? All right, when I'm near a redwood and the time of the redwood tree, it's alive for 1,000 years, strikes me in its vastness. And then what mystery means is I just can't understand it. I have all this knowledge. I look at the world through the lens of that knowledge. And then what I see in the moment of awe, I can't make sense of. And just to continue, it's interesting. I often get the question, Amy, like, how do I know I've had an experience of awe? And it's a really good question. It's actually a very deep question. But we've done a lot of work, and awe tends to be accompanied by tears, by goosebumps rushing up your back and your arms, right? By warmth in the chest, a lump in the throat. And these are all really interesting neurophysiological responses. And also things like, I feel kind of small. My concerns aren't that significant. There's this vast thing out in the world that I could be part of. So that's how we approach awe.
So I think we tend to, or at least I tend to peg awe in terms of nature, right? Like
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I talked about seeing the Grand Canyon or being on a mountaintop. You talk about other kinds of awe. So can you give us some maybe concrete examples of situations, and you do go over this in the book, but just for context for our listeners, situations or experiences that are not outdoor vastness, right? That could be an experience of awe. It's just sort of widen the lens of what awe is
Yeah.
outside of that outsideness.
Yeah, that was really, I think, one of our more important discoveries. We surveyed people from 26 different countries. And all we did is we said, tell us a story of awe. Like, what made you, when did you encounter a vast mystery that made you feel this emotion? And what we uncovered, Amy, is what I call in the book 8 wonders of life, which are, and they'll be intuitive, and they tell an important story, which is it's just not just nature. So it's the moral beauty of people, their kindness and courage, collective movement with others, dance and singing, and out of athletic competition, nature are kind of the most common. Then music, visual design, and spirituality, right? Obviously, religious experiences, mystical experiences. And then finally, two more unusual ones categories, which are big ideas, right? So Ralph Waldo Emerson, when he went outdoors and was struck by nature, he had all these big ideas about the soul and how what nature teaches us. So kind of intellectual awe. You may be struck by the idea of democracy or protest or what have you. And then finally, life and death. People around the world, when things are born or are growing, you mentioned a young child and being marveling at a child. That's kind of like life emerging. And then when people leave, when they pass away, we feel awe. So nature is fundamental. I think it's one of the two big sources of awe, but there are others that we should keep an eye on.
Yeah. So I did not think of this when I was reading your book, but while you were describing these things, it occurs to me that all of these 8 wonders are things that I can find outside individually. So
exactly right.
That structural design, I'm thinking of when I look at a mountain, especially in the wintertime, because the snow has a way of highlighting these things. That topography and the fractal, there's like triangles that come out on these mountains is just incredible. The way that you can see this geography on these mountainscapes. It does. It strikes awe. And you mentioned life and death. Hello, nature.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it, right? That's everything that's there. And so it's just, it strikes me that while and we'll talk about working to or practicing finding awe in nature, but it strikes me that all 8 of these categories are themselves tied to different experiences in nature. Yeah.
Being outdoors. No, I think it's profound. One of the things that I did in the book is I went to what I called awe spots, just like places where there would be awe. And a lot of it is outdoors, as you say, like contemplative practices outdoors, meditation outdoors, yoga outdoors, listening to music. Europe has great traditions of, community orchestras playing outdoors, dancing outdoors, sports outdoors. So it's a political protest, right? When we're inspired by somebody's courage, that happens outdoors. So I think it's fair to say on balance, you'll find more awe outdoors. And it's a good point.
Hey humans, just a quick break to remind you that if you want to build your own outdoor habit, the Humans Outside 365 Challenge is a great way to get started. Cool and exclusive challenge swag, including a finisher medal and a decal, is waiting for you. All you need to do is visit humansoutside.com/challenge. Don't get left out. Go to humansoutside.com/challenge to learn more now. Okay, back to the show. So we're talking about what awe is. Why is awe important? Do humans have a measurable need for this awe? And when you talk about awe outside, you use the term, I think, wild awe. So do humans have a measurable need, like internally, to make them tick for wild awe? And if so, how is that measured? How do you put your finger on that pulse?
Yeah, I do think we have a need for awe, and in particular wild awe, the awe for nature, and I would say the awe for the arts and certain kinds of and social connection to humans. We assess that in a couple of different ways, where we make the case for a need for wild awe. One is just part of the developmental unfolding of a human being. And kids, for the most part, gravitate to nature. They just explore it. They experiment with it. They want to be in it. They love, like Charles Darwin did, getting their hands dirty, looking at worms. And that is pretty reliable in how children develop. And that tells us there's something fundamental in the evolution of our relationship of the self to nature. The second is there a pretty clear physiological pattern that is grounded or rooted in our genes and different neurophysiological systems? And there's a terrific review by Ming Kuo from 2015 where, you just look at what nature does to the body, what scents do to the body out in nature, the smell of a tree or a flower, the sound of running water activates your vagus nerve. It shifts your brain chemistry. So that tells us our bodies are wired to respond to nature. Our bodies aren't wired to respond to computers or chairs or the like, but they really respond powerfully to nature. And the third is just the well-being question and health. Does it benefit you, right? If we have a need for something like protein-rich food, I'll just be healthier if I get it. And that one is a slam dunk. And you've probably referred to it on your show, Amy, like just getting out in nature, doing forest bathing, being near parks, looking at the sky, all of that benefits you all the way down to your cells, right? So it tells us we have a need that is wired into us for nature.
So often when we talk about those things that you just gave the example of, like, oh, going outside is good for you, it makes you happier, it makes your brain work better, and all those things are important, and there's so many more of them than I just mentioned. But what we don't talk about is that awe factor. Why is that? Like, why is that something that we just kind of glaze over when we're talking about the benefits of going outside? And maybe a little bit more on what is specifically that awe factor, flipping that around. What are the benefits of that awe regularly, of developing a habit where you're, not only looking at the night sky because of all the other things that are doing it for you, but also specifically for the awe?
Yeah. Yeah, the reason we don't invoke awe, although that's changing, I think this book will put it into the common conversation about the benefits of different things. Scientists hadn't studied awe for a long time. They thought you couldn't study it. People often, like when you say the word awe, they kind of think of new agey stuff, or maybe it's a guru, or it sounds sort of religious. And as a result, we haven't thought about the critical question you're asking, which is how can I live a good life, and what is a compass to live that good life, and what does awe bring me? And awe brings people a lot in terms of health benefits, mind benefits, emotion. And so that is really changing. A couple of examples in this review of the benefits of nature by Ming Kuo, she charts different pathways why getting outdoors is good for your nervous system. And she now says awe is one. In the psychedelic literature, there's a central hypothesis emerging that these serotonin altering chemicals, why do they help us when they do? Awe, right? It's like, wow, I feel amazed. I don't care about my stress anymore. So awe is emerging at last. It's been too long.
It's interesting, like you say, that maybe we don't do it because of the religious aspect. It strikes me as one of these outcomes that sort of transcends, well, it comes to both sides of that religious, if you want to have polarization, right? Because on the one, yogi kind of thing, well, the right, like the conservative side would be very against that idea, right? But on the conservative side, feeling awe of God is like, that's the goal. That you are in awe of God's awesome power and creativity himself and creating the world and that sort of thing. Like that is, in fact, I went to a very conservative college, and I remember having discussions about maybe we should stop using the word awesome in normal conversation, because that should be reserved for talking about God. And so it's really, from a spiritual standpoint, it's really like transcends both of those sides to the point where you think that it would be able to find common ground around studying that and quantifying it in a way to like bring more of it. I just think that's so funny that that's not true. People.
Yeah. Well, and that was really, I write about that because one of the main sources of awe is spirituality and religion and conversion and Hinduism, and it's in all of the great traditions, right? This transcendent experience. And that was really the mission of William James, which is a great American thinker, very influential in my field. And he wrote a very influential book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, where his central mission was pluralism, right? One key to religion is our feeling of being in relation to the divine, awe. And all cultures cultivate that. And we have different gods and practices and rituals, and James tried to put them all into one level. Said they're all great, right? And I agree, and I hope that maybe the discussion of spirituality as it relates to awe will just inch us away from the polarized debates about fundamentalism and atheism and so forth, just to honor it's a very human thing to feel spiritual.
Yeah. Is it possible to teach yourself to feel more awe, to make
Oh
this a
yeah.
habit of practice?
Yeah, it's striking to me, in part your mission is in keeping with this, which is you think of all the ways in which we try to improve our health, right, in our minds, and we meditate, and that's hard, and we go try folk dancing or singing, and that's tricky. I tried to play the guitar, couldn't do it. But awe is easy. Finding awe is actually easy. And we've developed a bunch of practices at the Greater Good Science Center about awe, where go for an awe walk, go look for awe in your walking, look at the sky, check out the sunset, touch a tree, tell people a story of awe from your childhood, right? Talk about, if you're work colleagues, talk about something awe inspiring that's happening at work and share stories, listen to music. So it's interesting, Amy. There's so many paradoxes about awe. One is like, you can't define it. You can define it. We shouldn't write about it. Everybody writes about it. And you can't go find it. Well, actually, it's really easy to find. And I call that everyday awe in the book. Our studies suggest people feel awe 2 to 3 times a week, and you can improve that. You can elevate that. And so there are a lot of ways to do it that I write about in the book.
Is it like any other habit where the more you practice it, the easier it gets to practice it?
I think so. In the only data on that, our Awe Walk study, we had people who are 75 years old or older take a regular weekly walk looking for awe or doing a really vigorous walk. And we found that not only did they benefit psychologically, the Awe Walk people, but they felt more awe with each walk, right? It's
Mm,
almost like, oh, I'm training my mind to get access to this basic emotion of awe, and then it arises, right, in
right,
surprising ways. So
right.
yeah, I think you can cultivate awe pretty robustly.
Yeah. So it's a practice of, I don't know, it's like any sort of intentionality, right? That the
Yeah, yeah,
more you practice noticing something, the more you notice something.
yeah,
If I was to go for a walk in the woods and be intentional about um taking in my context among the trees, tomorrow perhaps I would notice that even more than I do now, and then that would,
yeah,
depending on who I am and where I am in my life and all, other emotions and everything, check those boxes on practicing feeling a sense of vastness, right? That's
yeah,
in the
yeah,
definition.
yeah. Well, in our awe walk, here's a simple thing to do, right? And I do this all the time. And we worked on this and then tested it scientifically. Like, just practice how you perceive things. Like, practice look for details in small things,
Mm,
like the grain of the wood I'm looking at, and then span out and look at vast things, right? And that simple act is a pathway to awe, just by finding the patterns in details, looking at the vast things around you. And, there are just simple habits. When you get into a scene in a place of nature, just stop, right? Stop, try to quiet your mind, take a breath, and not name things, right? Just let it come to you. So there are simple things you can bring it to your daily life pretty easily.
one of the things that I've noticed is to keep a practice of looking for unique things around me. So when I'm in somewhere new, that's very easy. Everything's unique. My family and I were recently in Florida, which is, of course, very different from Alaska. And my husband and I went for a run in a very urban space near his aunt's house. And I mean, we're in Florida, so it's entirely different animal population. We're running against 4 lane, very busy state sort of highway situation. I mean, we're running by a Wawa, okay? Like, we're not in nature per se. And nonetheless, I felt like I was on some kind of animal safari. I'm like, wow, what is that? And it's this giant iguana, and there's a crocodile in the ditch, and just on and on and on. And then we passed by some cows. It was amazing. I'm still thinking about it, okay? I very much doubt that the person who lives in that neighborhood, when going on the same run, is predisposed to notice those things. But if they were to step back and say, what am I going to see today out here? Like, let's count some animals. Let's notice who's out sunning themselves today in the ditch. They would perhaps feel that way. And I model that a little bit when I'm at home. So in my normal environment, when I go out in the same walk I take all the time, right? Same path, same woods, same time of day, but it's always different. There's always a chance to find that awe. It's in the fact that the sunlight today and the way it hits the tree at 2:05 p.m. is not the way it hit the tree at 2:05 p.m. yesterday, because we gained 5 minutes of light. Thank you, Jesus. The moose, we've got this resident moose out there right now. I'm not sure she's very old. I think she's probably just about a year old, which is to say she's not particularly humongous, and she doesn't have any babies, which is unusual this time of year for female moose. They always have some sort of baby moose following them around. But I'm always interested in, like, what has she been snacking on? What exactly does a moose eat in January?
Yeah, Rachel Carson has a spectacular essay, The Great Environmentalist, and really very important historical figure, the Silent Spring in the 50s, and it's how to teach your child to wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And she just offers these simple ideas that you're getting to, of like, when you go places, just notice differences, just ask questions, think about how small things relate to the vast. Think about how things are changing, how, wow, I love this one hike and I'm going on it at 4 p.m. today. Oh, it's different than it was at 6 p.m., right? Notice the light. There's just so much to notice that's awe-inspiring that your example reminds us of. So it's worth thinking about.
So you just used the word wonder, and it makes me question how feeling wonder and awe, are these synonyms? Are these synonyms? Are they two different concepts, awe and wonder?
They are. They're different. Although they're very closely related. Awe is the feeling you have when you see something vast and mysterious or hear it. Wonder is the mental state that follows awe. Right? Like, what just happened? I'm really fascinated by that. I'm curious about it. And, one of my favorite historical stories about wonder is Descartes and Newton, great thinkers that they were awestruck by rainbows, like.
As we often rainbows? All are.
Yeah, like, how do they work?
Relatable.
And so they're in this state of wonder, like, wow, how would light come through a water molecule and bend and turn to the color spectrum. And so they did a bunch of science to figure it out. So that's what wonder does. It is fueled by awe, and then it leads us to try to figure things out.
So it's almost like, or rather it is, an outcome of awe.
Yeah, it is. And in the book, I talk about a few important outcomes of awe. One is just modesty and humility. You just feel small. Another one's interesting is just kindness. People feeling awe, they have this urge to serve and to be good in some interesting way that we've documented.
We could use more of that. That's for sure.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Can you give us 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 tips for filling life with more awe opportunities, like creating this practice, whether that is through spending time outside or in other ways?
Yeah. I have been really struck. I've taught happiness for 25 years, teach the practices of it to every imaginable audience, and awe is actually pretty easy to access, which is striking. So the first thing I think is really to think about your mindset, right? Give yourself time, be oriented towards wandering, right? A little, rather than like being goal directed and following Google Maps, and try to be open-minded, like you were suggesting, like look for things that are different and what's new. So that's the mindset of awe, of wandering and wondering and being open. And then, we've tested an awe walk, which is simply, if you're walking, go someplace that seems a little mysterious and new, and be open to awe. We've tested a few of like, spend 2 minutes just looking up at the sky and following clouds and notice what their patterns are like. Sunsets are obvious. Listen to water. You probably have a lot of water in Alaska. I found this very powerful when I wrote this book in part when I was grieving the loss of my brother, really stressed out. And I would just listen to water, like listen to the stream on the Berkeley campus, listen to a wave. And Rachel Carson nicely writes about like, try to see if you can find the pattern of sound and how it originates in water, which is amazing. Listen to birdsong. And then, a lot of cultural things. Think about a piece of music that brought you goosebumps and listen to it. Think about what it means to you, what it teaches you about yourself. So there are a lot of awe practices to cultivate.
Hmm. Can you describe, as a final thing for us, a time that you felt a noticeable or maybe even profound sense of awe outdoors? Give us
Oh
like a
my God.
linchpin example here.
Yeah, I mean, I have been lucky to have had so many of those experiences of awe outdoors. I think the big recent one was backpacking with my daughter. I have a couple. Well, this is a fascinating one. Last year we were backpacking down by Bishop on the in the East Sierras, and it was the day that this 1 in 1,000 year storm flooded Death Valley, which has never
Mm-hmm.
happened. And then that storm ripped up over us and sent this electrical storm over us. And it was fascinating because it was thrilling we were at, I think, 11,000 feet. These clouds are rolling in, they're dark and angry. And we were like, wow, and it was awe inspiring. And then they start sending lightning bolts down, hitting, the ravine, the mountains right across from us. And then it was terrifying. So it was a great lesson in like, wow, awe is just raw and it's different than terror. So I've been lucky to find a lot of those big experiences of awe in the high Sierras.
Mm-hmm. And chasing them by just putting yourself in a position where you
Yeah.
might encounter something and then being open and aware to absorb it as it comes with that sort of
Yeah.
described as like childlike almost
Yeah, exactly.
willingness to have wonder or to open the door to that concept and not be so grown
Just
up all the time.
and just give yourself a minute. I tell medical doctors whom I teach regularly, like, they all have little gardens nearby. People find a lot of awe in gardens. Like, just get outside and have your lunch outside and listen for a minute,
Mm-hmm.
as you're eating your sandwich, and just be open to it, like you said.
Interesting. Well, sir, thank you so much for your time today on Humans Outside. We sure do value your expertise, and people can find your book wherever books are sold.
Yes, at Amazon and hopefully local bookstores.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy. Great being with you.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Humans Outside. Help me out by leaving a 5-star rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help other listeners find the podcast too. Now, go get outside. Until next time, we'll see you out there.